The one thing that I learned recently of seeing Joe or anybody, me, Joe, anybody, if we're gonna take a risk and we're gonna play an Edward anything, especially on like Howard Stern or anything like that, where you know you can't get it back, but you can't. Good luck.
An all-new episode of The Jeremy White Show.
Available wherever you stream.
My next guest is one of the greatest guitarists on the planet. The brand new video for Thicker Than Blood is available now wherever you get your music videos. They're hitting the road as well. Going to be doing a bunch of tour dates across the UK and then coming back to America later next year, wrapping up at the end of February. Make sure you visit extreme-band.com to get all your tickets, and their latest record, 6, is phenomenal. We're going to talk all about that. Welcome to the show for the first time, the one, the only, Nuno Bettencourt from Extreme. How's it going?
Good, man. Can we just end the interview right there? That was amazing. I don't think I can live up to that.
I kind of just sold everything that you needed to sell, right?
It's anything I want anybody to know anyways.
How's it going? You guys are in rehearsal right now. I mean, at this point, is rehearsal even necessary? I mean, don't you guys know the set?
Yeah, you kind of just, we book them, but we never really show up anymore. It's just, but it used to be that way. We haven't rehearsed together in a long time, but unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever way you want to look at it, this new album forces us to get together and actually learn the songs that we recorded. Like, we're now an Extreme Tribute band, and we have to learn songs that people don't understand, that when you're writing and you record on an album, you never actually really tour them or play them. You're just creating them. And then all of a sudden the album comes out and you're like, uh-oh. And you're literally sitting there deciphering like somebody on YouTube trying to learn your own shit. It's just like, I did that. Why did I do that? Why is this so difficult?
Right. I mean, yeah, it's true. I guess you kind of have to go back and listen to what you put down to tape, right? It's like you did it in the moment, but then it's like, oh shit, I have to go learn this.
I'm not even, that's like a real anxiety that all artists have, that all of a sudden they got to tour the songs and they honestly go into cover band mode, like, because you're essentially learning something that's been recorded. You can't remember ever really doing it because you only did it in that moment. So yeah, it's interesting.
Have you ever gone on YouTube and looked at a tutorial for one of your own songs?
Oh, without a doubt. I'm looking it up right now for Thicker Than Blood. I'm trying to work out how the hell I did that solo, see if somebody else knows.
That's amazing. Talking about solos, I mean, like, geez, who would have thought that in 2023, I mean, like, you would have the most iconic guitar solo on like rock radio and in the world. Like, everybody was talking about Nuno this year. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was an interesting time because I was as in shock as everybody else was. I was like, listen, I know I can play a bit of decent guitar through the years, but I've been doing it for nearly 30 plus years, and I know it's a decent song from Extreme, but when magazines were putting on their cover like Solo of the Century and all this stuff, I was just like, okay, what is going on here? And I think there's got to be a deeper, because there's got to be a deeper meaning behind it. Because I'm not even saying that humbly. I mean, I was really going, okay, I'm that guy who always asks, the Virgo producer who always asks why does something happen? I can't, and I think at the end of the day, I think what got everybody so excited, it was the guitar solo, but I think it was the guitar solo within the song of a band and a rock and roll album, and almost seeing like, when you have your peers hitting you up that are like heroes to you, like Brian Mays of the world, and talking about that stuff. And I remember specifically with Steve Lukather from Toto, who hit me up, and I finally said to him, I'm like, come on, man, really, come on, solo of the century. And he's like, look, he goes, do we know you can play? Of course we know you can play. We've always known you could play. And I said, well, what do you think is happening? And he's like, look, it's been a minute. It's been a minute. Not that there's not, he said, not amazing guitar players, but we follow a bunch of them online, and there's a bunch of dudes that every day I watch, and I'm like, go fuck yourself. And that was amazing.
Pretty much, yeah. Everybody's jerking off on Instagram.
Yeah, everybody's like doing stuff that I couldn't, honestly, I'm not even being humble. That is like, Jesus, that's some crazy, I'm looking at it. I quite don't understand all the, the pink, the picking and everything that's going on. But I think what got it, there's a lot of great bands and a lot of great guitar players now. So I don't want to sound like, wow, I came and saved guitar all of a sudden. No, what it is, I think what it was is just like the throwback version of the old school version of rock and roll, which is what we do. There's not a lot of, the last of the Mohicans left, right? So I think So I think when people kind of saw that, I think what I realized that's been missing, it wasn't necessarily just guitar playing within a song, in a rock and roll song with harmonies and an arrangement and a band. I think it was like that mythology of rock and roll, if you know what I mean. Getting that excitement of seeing a band that's all in a video and passionate and fired up. And even during the solo, I've always been a very physical performer, or even physical when I play, in a sense. It's always got to have this energy. And I think, that's basically what Luca said to me. He's like, well, when's the last time, fine, let's forget that it's you guys. When's the last time anybody came out where you were like calling me and calling everybody else, going, have you heard this? Have you heard the solo? Have you heard that? So I was like, okay, I'll give you that. But at the same time, I'm like, I've been doing this stuff for a long time. So I think it's just people a bit starved for it within the rock and roll band aspect of it.
But it's true though, because you listen to any, if you're exposed to rock radio today, it's like, all these rock alternative bands are shoegaze with the shittiest guitar tone, and like they're not really like playing melodic licks or solos. It's pretty like straightforward kind of stuff. And you came and like, okay, we're gonna write a classic rock song with a blistering guitar solo, a catchy hook. Like it freaked people out because we're not used to hearing it in 2023.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. I think when you're me in a band that's been doing that for decades, we don't realize outside the bubble what's happening or not really happening. It's a little, I think artists are always in that kind of selfish, kind of self-centered bubble, in the sense of, especially creatively in music. Of course, we listen to other music, but we don't realize the zeitgeist of what's happening or what's really not happening, because you're too busy doing your own stuff. And so I think you're right. I think it's just that it's something so obvious in a way, and I don't think it's as groundbreaking as what people say it is. But I think I was watching people that I admire, Rick Beato, all these guys going, Nuno's raised the bar. He's raised the bar. I'm like, raise the bar. I raised this bar like it's the same bar I've been playing it since like 93, 94.
Does it kind of annoy you that people are now recognizing it? They're like, oh, Nuno's amazing. Like I've always been amazing.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I would say that, but I think I've always been there doing this, and I think I'm not saying you can't compose and create something exciting. I think I'll give it that credit in the sense of like, okay, you recorded a solo, it's in a song and it's refreshing right now, and take it for what it's worth. Everybody's just like, just shut the hell up and take the compliment. But, for me, it was like, it made me realize that, man, we need more of this, and I don't mean extreme. I mean, just in general, we need, and it's not just, the greatest compliment I think I got when this thing first came out wasn't like solo of the century or, you're playing amazing or whatever it was. I think the thing that I really related to, and I saw in a lot of the comments from fans and even from some other bands and peers that I know, it was like, thank you. And I'm like, thank you. And I was like, what do you mean, thank you? It's like, no, thank you for the album. Like, thank you for a rock album that we can put from top to bottom that you actually gave a shit about. And there's 12 songs that you're really excited about and proud of. And you took the time. I remember, when Tom Morello said that, that you took a lot of care into this, like you were actually cared about it. It was such a weird comment to hear. I didn't even know if it was a compliment, but it was like, wow, I get it. It's like, it would be nice that like we did back in the day, all the bands we grew up on, whether it was a Van Halen album or a Zeppelin album, not that where I'm comparing myself to them, but it was like, you couldn't wait for the body of work. It wasn't just a song on a playlist. It wasn't just a playthrough of a solo on Instagram. It was like, no, man, there's something coming with artwork and there's a tour and all this stuff. And
it mattered.
It mattered, and you got pumped up for it, So hopefully in this digital age, we can try to go, try to keep that going, because there's a lot of bands doing it. Trust me, in the more modern rock, and guitar players like Andy James and Five Finger Death Punch, and these guys are just so incredible. But I'm saying in more of our old school rock and roll, where it's a little bit more, it's a bit more simplified what we did. I always call it simplexity is the word, where it's simple. Songs are always 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes from like the beginning of time. Rock and roll has not changed that way. But I think bands who care enough about it make it a little more complex within those simple spaces, meaning that if you peel it back, there's some lyrics in there, there's some meaning, there's some melody, there's some harmony, there's a solo, there's an arrangement, there's a musicianship, instead of, so I think that was always the beauty of rock and roll, was like, it was It was always complexity. There was always like, man, it's just a 3.5 minute song, but why do I want to keep hearing it, and I discover new things underneath it,
Yeah, it's pleasurable to listen to. I mean, look, you look at guitarists today, and it's like trying to get some delay and some chorus on a dirty guitar tone today. It's like, no, what are you doing? That's 280s. You stay away from that. Everybody's so afraid of processed tone or like any type of modulation. I'm like, why can't we bring that back?
Yeah, well,
even tapping in a solo, like everybody's afraid to do it. Why? It's cool.
Yeah, look, I mean, I always said, if you're gonna tap or do anything, you're obviously you're instantly raising your hand to Edward, and which is fine. I have never had any issue wearing my influences on my sleeve, in the sense of like, I'm proud of, anybody who comes out and thinks they invented everything is like full of shit. And I think what happens is you end up creating your own sound and your own style through all the different inspirations you have, and in my case, it was always, Page and Edward and Brian May and Al Di Meola was a big percussive one for me. And, Pat Travers and people like that. Pat Travers was a big part of my funk rock approach to everything. The album Go For What You Know was like, meant everything to me. I listened to that religiously and still do. So I think inevitably, if you try to get your own voice that way, with all your different influences, you don't do it on purpose, but there's no doubt you're going to hear Edward in your playing, and you're going to hear Brian May in your playing, and different solos and different stuff,
Yeah. Talking about Edward, of course, that solo you mentioned in the presence of that, it was sort of like an homage to him. There was recently an interview on the Howard Stern show where a big guitar player was on there, and he was trying to play an Edward lick, and he was like, "Oh, this is by far, nobody could play this. This is hard." Do you think you could play Mean Street by Van Halen, Nuno?
Look, I'm not taking that bait. I already got in trouble with Slash once already by mentioning his name. I'm not going.
That's why I didn't say no names.
I'm not going into the house of Joe. I just did. Listen, I just did an interview. Honestly, maybe about a week ago. With Joe.
But it sucks when the press takes shit out of context and it makes you look like you're calling somebody out, right?
That is true. Like the whole Slash thing was just me. I wasn't even talking about Slash specific. I was talking about me Slash anybody like playing different stuff in R&B and things like that. But that's just the second everybody waits, especially when you're doing well. I think it seems like all of a sudden like they're like, okay, there it is. Yeah, there it is. It can't all be that good for Bettencourt. We got to bring him down and we got to rip him apart. Dude. But I give a shit as that Slash knew what I was talking about. But at the end of the day, when it comes to what happened with just Satriani recently, I just did an interview for this documentary that his son is doing based on G3, and you got albums like Surfing with the Alien, which is like that stuff is lore. It's like instrumental guitar. Yeah, it's a masterpiece.
It's ridiculous.
And the one thing that I learned recently of seeing Joe or anybody, me, Joe, anybody, if we're going to take a risk and we're going to play an Edward anything, especially on like Howard Stern or anything like that, where you can't get it back or you can't, good luck. That's all I'm saying is good luck. Why? Because you're going now into hallowed ground. It'd be like, I don't know. I know this kind of like silly, but it'd be like Edward even trying to do something that, I remember seeing Edward on a stage at the NAMM show. And it was really strange. It was like a little jam, but it was all the guys outside of Edward with these country, Alvin Lee, Steve Morse, country picking, Southern fried chicken, crazy like stuff. And there was Edward. So these guys would take these solos, and then it got to Edward, and it was like, ooh, that's interesting, because it was Edward out of his element. And the reason it was strange, it wasn't because of what Edward was doing, it was because the whole rhythm section, the whole band was not his genre. Mm-hmm. So it kind of exposed him in a way as well, going like, man, this is not your lane. This is not your vibe. And some people were in the crowd going, oh, see what I'm saying? And I'm like, no. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of being a great guitar player is nobody can do you like you. Nobody can step into Edward's domain and fucking play Edward like Edward. The same thing with Satriani or Vai or Page or any of these guys. But in this case, if you're going to do it, you're exposing yourself. You're exposing yourself. And I think even, Joe came out and said something, like an apology or something. Yeah. But if any of us are going to play Mean Streets, which, yeah, I can play it. I think I can play it. I can play it. I think like Nuno can play it. Yeah. But you got to understand, people really get confused about Edward to me. They think it's like Edward was this flashy tapping, and it's all about this kind of technical side of things. I never saw that. Edward's pocket rhythm, feel, swing is what separated him from everybody. If you're just going to play the notes and try to play the notes, good luck. It's a feel thing. You know, you can learn it. You can learn to note for note, but man, there's a pocket there, and especially Mean Streets, this funkier thing. It's all rhythmic. It's like he's a drummer, you know, and that's one of the things that related to Edward a lot is I played drums first, and when I first read that, I was like, my God, this makes so much sense. Why the rhythm and the tightness and the swing that he had came from, you know, when you play, it's a drum. It's a drum groove. If you're not a drummer that played on guitar and you're going to attempt to try this other stuff that he does that's a lot more like elasticy sounding and, you know, like in Hot for Teacher. But if you're going to do Mean Streets, people saying it's impossible to play. It's not impossible to play. It's impossible to do it if you don't have a kind of rhythmic drumming background, because that's all it is. The whole thing is him doing that. It's like him tapping on a snare drum. So then he incorporated with like harmonics that he does. And that's the perfect nuance of what I was saying earlier, when Edward would take his drumming into like something that maybe he learned, or maybe his influences in swing and Billy Gibbons and ZZ Top. And then all of a sudden, then you create this Edward that's like, oh my God, it's like a triple threat thing going on here, that it's not just notes, there's harmonics, there's tapping that he does, then there's rhythm. It's the perfect, like Mean Streets is the perfect storm of like why people don't fuck with Edward. It's like, okay, but it's not the hardest thing he's ever played, in my opinion. No. It's hard if you don't have a rhythmic feel. But you take this song's like I'm the One.
Well, I was gonna say, you listen to I'm the One, or like, you know, Hang 'em High. Like,
you listen to just I'm the One. You don't hear many people just playing, and I'm talking about the first 10 seconds. Forget the song. You play the intro to I'm the One, and you send me. I've seen the best guitar players that I know. My own buddies trying to do it on Instagram, and I'm like, hey, power to you for trying. But there's a whole this whole percussive, rhythmic, crazy mental approach to guitar that Edward had. That's why it was always so baffling. It wasn't just like it was difficult. It wasn't the difficulty. It was like, man, it was so fucking him. It was so quirky that you're like, good luck having that feel and that approach. So that's what made him the king, and that's what still makes him the king. And so when guys like me are doing my stuff and tipping their hat, like even in the Rise solo that everybody's raving about, there's no doubt that there's Edward all over that. And the beginning of it might as well be right out of Eruption with the beginning of the solo. And not that you're doing it on purpose, it's just your influence, you know. And so like, look, you got to give Joe a bit of a pass on this one, because it's Joe doing Edward, and you know, and even I'm more pissed at Sammy for allowing him to do it. Meaning, like, because Sammy's like, man, that's why I got Joe. Nobody can do this stuff. And I'm like, look, you're right there. You're already putting him on the spot, you know, and doing those things and asking people to play those things. It's really difficult. And if you're gonna do it, man, and Joe probably knows this now, because Joe is untouchable as Joe Satriani. He's the greatest Joe Satriani you'll ever hear, and that's what I love about Eric Johnson, Joe, myself, anybody that. Nobody can attack you when you're doing you. Nobody. Yeah. Nobody can say you suck as you, or that you didn't. I mean, granted, you can try to pull your own shit off live, and sometimes it's like, you know. But my point is like nobody can ever rip Joe Satriani apart in that way. Now, what they can do is, because he put himself in that position, to go like, if I'm going to go on and say like, man, I'm about to do this right now. Any of us. It's not just Joe. It's any of us. You know, you try to do, there's some ripping stuff that Slash did. People don't even realize that. Everybody looks at Slash as like this bluesy player. There's some solos on Paradise City, some shit that is so crazy and shredding and fast that you're like, all right, I'm going to leave that there. I've seen cover bands try to do it, and they're like, I'm going to leave that part alone. And they're going to do, you know, they're going to do this Sweet Child of Mine, and they're going to do stuff like that. But every guitar player has the things that we can do as guitar players, that we can kind of do. But as far as doing their DNA, good luck. And I think Joe, you know, I think Joe and Sammy's like, yeah, that's why I got Joe. He's gonna nail it for you right here. And even Joe was like, no, man, this shit is fucking impossible. Then if I'm saying those words, I'm not playing after that. If I'm saying it's impossible for me, the next thing I'm doing is putting the fucking guitar down. Yeah. But you know, he apologized, because you know what? Everybody will rip you apart, you know, and you, unfortunately, to learn something like Mean Streets, you got to sit down. You got to go like what I did. You know, you literally sit there like a child, and I don't care how good you are. it's kind of going back to the drawing board because you're like, oh, this is different.
Mhm.
What is happening here? This rhythm pattern. And you're like, oh my God, it's like, and you're like, oh my God, he's drumming. Got it. Get that. Can I do that? Do I play drums? No, don't play me. Just don't do it. Don't do it. You know.
Well, that's true. Were you asked to take part in that tour at all? Like, were you approached by Sam and Mike, say, hey, come play guitar for us on this Van Halen tribute thingy? Or
no, I get no respect, man. I get no respect.
Listen,
Listen, you know what? This goes back to, it's funny, I said it to Sammy not too long ago. You know, I had an opportunity. Sammy would never ask me to do anything because I think I might have, I think I might have blown that chance. But he, you know, back in the day when we were first coming into the scene, I don't know if I've ever told this story, but might as well get into more trouble now.
Yeah, let's do it.
But back in the day when Extreme first came out, I got approached by a guitar magazine. They were doing this thing where they were like, hey, these new up and coming, you know, quote unquote guitar heroes,
right?
Interviewing their heroes, meaning like, so we want you to interview Edward. And my head was like, wait, what? When I was like 22, 23. And
No,
like,
you must have been freaking out.
So I was like, this is incredible because I knew all the catalog, knew all the nuances. I couldn't wait to ask him. I was like studying, had like, you know, I'm not a journalist. I don't want to interview people, but I was ready. I was going in and prepping for about a month. And then like 2 or 3 days before the interview, I get a call from my manager, and my manager says, hey, I got some bad news. I'm like, what? He goes, the Edward interview's not happening. And I was like, whoa. I was like, my heart sunk. And I would think I might have vomited a little bit, but I was just like, it was really heartbreaking. But then I said, why? Is it me? He doesn't want to do it? And he goes, no, they're still doing it. I'm like, wait, what? They're still doing the interview? Like I got booted out of it. Like I got replaced. He goes, yeah, by Sammy. And I was just like,
what?
Wait a second. I was like, hold on one second. What just happened? He's in the band with him. I thought the whole idea was somebody that's coming up that's on some covers, but is going to interview like somebody, his hero, and it's going to be incredible. Yeah, but Sammy got wind of it, and he was offended that they didn't ask him because he's a guitar player as well, and all this stuff.
Come on.
So I got kind of thrown out of it, but I was upset. I was not upset. I was just disappointed because. Yeah. It was a dream. It was a dream come true, right? To sit there and ask him about certain guitar pieces, even deep cuts that maybe he wouldn't have been asked about before, and techniques and things like that that really influence people. Mm-hmm.
But even asking about why he uses a harmonizer, stuff like that.
But me and Sammy, we spoke about it. Later on, I was on tour with that. Not on tour with them. I went to see a couple of shows. And Sammy kind of said, "Hey man, sorry I beat you out of that thing." And I'm like, "Beat me out of it, bro." I was like. But then I reminded him again just recently. We did that interview up at my studio, and I was like, I still haven't forgiven you for taking that dream, that kid from Hudson, Mass, who was going to finally interview Eddie Van Halen or have a conversation or meet him. How about just meet him and talk to him? But no, I love Sammy. We're good buddies. But that was a true story, man. I was crushed. But you know what? In a way, I got to meet Edward in a different way, where it was in more of a, I don't know how to explain this without
intimate kind of way, as opposed to like a professional.
Yeah, thing. It was very organic, and it was like we met in a way that was really, he was so beautiful towards me. He was really respectful, talked about playing and talked about stuff, and it was opposed to me being the kid going, "Oh, Edward, I love you. You're a god." It was more like we had already, had a few albums out and 3 sides and all that, and
yeah.
You never know if your hero listens to you or not, Mm-hmm. And then when you finally meet him and he mentions a couple of things and he does listen to you, man, it's there's nothing, more special than that, and especially there was a quick, short little 30-second story that probably was the greatest story for me from Edward. And I once again, I'm not sure I ever told the story, but I was Extreme was opening. I want to say we were opening for ZZ Top. It was ZZ Top or David Lee Roth at that time. I can't remember. But the reason, I'll tell you why I forgot, because our sound guy had to go home. There was a death in the family. And when a band loses their front of house, it's a big deal because he's the fifth member of the band.
Yeah.
Then
He knows how the band's supposed to sound.
The band sounds and everything else and what we want. And all of a sudden we're like, oh wow, we're on tour. We had to get somebody else. And then we got told that, Van Halen just finished their run and their sound guy is going to come and mix us. And I'm like, you want him? Like, hell yeah. If he can mix Edward, hell yeah. Let's bring him in. And I remember it's one of those things when somebody flies in, the band shows up, the crew's already sound check. The dude's already out there before we even meet him, so I get on stage. And whenever I get on stage, every guitar player has this. I saw on the Generation X tour, like everybody gets, the second they plug in, they play a lick. It's always the same one to kind of check their sound and check their tone and do their thing. And for me, because I play so percussively, I've always played this riff to He-Man Woman Hater off of the Porn Graffiti album. It's this real kick drum. Speaking of percussion, like it was like
you weren't a drummer.
Like a drummer playing double kick metal pattern, right? Yeah. And that always checked if my sound was tight, it was the way I liked it and everything else. So I'm playing it. And all of a sudden, as I'm playing it, I plug in and I hear this voice coming through my wedges like, hey, this is I'm not going to mention his name because he might not want me to talk about him, but it was Joe. Let's call it Joe. But he says, hey, I'm front of house. I'm like, I get on the mic. Nice to meet you, man. Meeting on stage. And he says to me, hey, that lick you were just playing, is that yours? So first thing I thought was like, great. We got a new sound guy. Hasn't even heard the album because it's on the album. So like, he probably hasn't had a chance to listen to Extreme Porn Graffiti. And I'm like, yeah, with an attitude, I'm like, yeah, that's mine. He goes, and he saw that I was kind of annoyed. So then he runs up to the stage and he meets me and he says, listen, man, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to annoy you or anything. I was asking you because I've been hearing that lick on the Van Halen tour for like a month. I go, wait, what do you mean you've been hearing that lick? He goes, yeah, Eddie, I thought he was writing a new song and I kept hearing him play this like slower though, like down, like playing it like, and he kept like playing it fat. And I was like, oh my God, he's creating a new song. And it was exactly that riff. I'm like, wait, are you trying to tell me that Edward was learning one of my riffs? I'm like, listen, I don't have proof. I don't have audio proof. But as a kid, a younger kid, and hearing something like that your hero maybe, just maybe, might have tried to learn one of your licks, which definitely was an interesting lick on that album. It was definitely an odd thing to play and learn. I asked him to tell me that story every night before I went to bed on the bus. I'm like, can you tell me that story again about Edward was learning He-Man Woman Hater? But look, I got no audio proof, but I'll take it. I believe him. and look, those are dream scenarios. You hear somebody that maybe one day, somebody that you that changed your life. Edward is one of the big, not the biggest influences on me, and he's the guy, man. He'll always be the guy, and there. Nobody, not me, not anybody else, not Satriani, not Sorry Joe, not Nuno, not Brian even. Brian, everybody does their own lane, but nobody's going to take that Edward throne. Nobody. He's the king.
No, I agree. Are you in the school of like the old school Van Halen 1 Brown sound, or do you like the Foreign Lawful Carnal Knowledge Process kind of tone?
Yeah, no, my allegiance is Brown all day. All day. Yeah. And for me, it's so interesting because I don't know that I did that with my amps because of Edward. Mm-hmm. I've always heard it like that to me. If somebody goes to my amp right now, even now when they go on stage, they'll think somebody went over and messed with my knobs before I went on to sabotage me. Huh. It's like everything is like trebles on 1.5, 2, mids on 1.5, 2, bass is on 4, like 5.
Okay.
Presence all down, so I can really turn it up and I have it really warm and really like punchy and loud, but still percussive. And I imagine that's what if Eddie's was brown, I think mine is it's a shade darker than that. Purple?
Yours is mocha.
Yeah, mocha, something. I don't know what it is, but yeah.
Yeah. Extreme 6 available now for VG Music. It's one of the best rock records of the last century. Let's be honest here. Everybody's saying it.
I'll take it. It sounds big. Century.
Right?
Years.
The century's greatest rock record from one of the greatest bands of all time. That should be like the commercial,
Yeah.
Extreme-band.com. Go check them out on tour. Last time I saw you guys was at the M3 Rock Fest a couple of years ago. We were hanging out after the show in the Extreme corner at the hotel. We're drinking wine out of the bottle and just
Absolutely.
It was insane. Is the live show still the most important part to you? Is that still fun?
Yeah, look, I think that's everything. I mean, I've never liked making albums. I hate it, actually. I hate it. I hate making it.
Is it too surgical for you, or what is it?
Yeah, it's because, you know what it is? It's because when you write a song or you write a riff and you're hearing it and then the band plays it, or in my head, at least right away, production-wise, the drum sound, everything, the hi-hat pad, I hear everything right away. It's like a fucking matrix just drops down, and which is amazing. But now I got to go and recreate everything I'm already hearing, which sometimes it falls short, or sometimes it's not what you think it is. Sometimes it's like having, being pregnant, and you know what the baby's going to look like, but now you got to it's like 9 months of making it happen somehow. And it's just, right. To me, that's just the growing pains, and it's the pains and the birthing of it. I'm not a fan of that. I love to just go on stage, have one shot to play the track, and move on. Go for it. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's great, sometimes it's brilliant, sometimes it's not so great. And it's a crowd, it's a relationship, and it's theirs and it's yours, and you leave it on that stage and you go home. I've never, since I've been born, been able to watch an old VHS copy back in the day from a board tape. Right now, if you will not catch me on Instagram or any socials watching, the second I see a live clip of us, even from 2 nights ago, I'm like, nope.
Swipe.
Nope. It's horrible. It's like, I don't want to know about it. I don't want to know how good or bad or whatever I could have done or whatever, like going through a phone. And I like to remember it how I remember it, and it was special to me with that audience, and then move on. So the album is great when you finish it, it's mastered, and you actually want to share it with people, you're excited. That's like great, because the process leading up to that was nothing but just anxiety to me, just like, it's got to be that good.
Are you the type that here's a record, like, oh man, I'd love my drums to sound like that on my album, or like because you go from those early Extreme records to 3 sides, for example. I mean, like, it was mid 90s, and like a lot of records were getting away from that process tone. 3 sides, it sounds like you're in the room with you guys, like that drum sound of that, and the guitar sounds insane. Then you go back to the cannonball snare kind of stuff, like Porno Graffiti, and very different records.
I think it's one of those things where I've never really, like I said, I think we've always been in a bit of a bubble in the sense of whether it was 80s, 90s, or 70s. I think it's like whatever's really turning you on at the time. I mean, are you influenced by stuff you hear? Of course. I mean, a lot of the 90s stuff that we came out in the 90s essentially anyways, even though we're a bit of an 80s band. We came out 89, 90 on the cusp. But as much as we are who we are as Extreme, I loved, and a lot of bands from the 80s were like, fuck, the 90s and Nirvana and grunge, all stuff. I was like, hell yeah. I loved it, man. I still love it. I'm playing this somewhere in a couple of days, and the opening song I'm doing is Breed from Nirvana, because I love singing that shit and playing it. I love that track. But I welcome music. I love music, and I love anything that's refreshing and new, and anything that somebody's like, and at that time when Nevermind came out, and the Soundgarden stuff, which they were label mates of ours, and Temple of the Dog, that was even earlier than that. I was like, hell yeah, because it didn't sound like grunge to me, and it didn't sound like 90s. It always sounded like everything I grew up with in the 70s anyways. It always sounded like, Black Sabbath based and heavy, and even Nirvana. I always heard of Nirvana as like a heavy Beatles to me. I just always did. I always thought those I always thought the melodies were really popping. The grooves, even Grohl was doing on that stuff. It was like all these Ringo Starr-ish Beatles. And then I finally read somewhere later that Kurt actually said that. He goes, he feels like there's just so much of a Beatles influence there that nobody sees in the way they form songs in these simple pop, because he was screaming and kind of had this rasp. It might have not sounded so nice. But like, please, a lot of those melodies, you break them down, and they're like, a lot of them are very poppy and they're very hooky,
That's true. You know what? I've never actually really thought of it that way, because even lyrically, it's very poppy, but it's sort of singer-songwritery in a way too. It's like,
I mean, all the come as you are, as the places I want you. It's like, it's not fucking, it's not thrash metal. It's like there's hooky melodies there. It's like, you go and listen to any of their stuff and you go, wow, there's a pop sensibility there. That was that's what I talk about, that simplexity, where you do it so well that there's layers, that when you start looking at the layers, all we're hearing is like down, we're hearing like when it comes into the heaviness of it. But when you break it down and even the soft part of that verse, you're like, wow, there's a melody there. And there's a very pop sensibility there. And it's very cool. That's what I loved about Nirvana as well,
Yeah. We're running out of time, but just real quick, live wise, what are you playing these days? Have you switched over to the digital stuff, or are you still running some tube amps up there?
So it's tube or die, man. It has to be. It just, there's the only way I can describe an amp and a head with tubes and electronics and valves and stuff like that is, it's the human version of an amp, where it can be not great sometimes, and there's a relationship between, there's a push and pull, there's always like a love-hate with your amp and your tone from one gig to the next. And I think that's what makes you connect all human at once. Do I get digital stuff, and do I get all the modeling and everything? Yeah, I have a Kemper in the studio, and it's great for writing, and it's tempting as fuck to use it. But the second I put up, my 57 and the 421 in front of that one off axis off the speaker, and I have the head where it sounded, it's just like, no, it just, if you don't A/B it, you don't know. If you get lazy and you just do it, then you're like, oh, I can do that. But then the people that I know that are always like, okay, do that, but do me a favor, right next to it, just plug into your amp again. And you're going to have a love-hate with it. But there's something that happens with air moving and speakers and microphones and things that are just, it's too human, it's the emotion of the way you play comes out more, it's the only way I can describe it,
That's really profound. Wow. Well,
but that's why somebody asked me the other day, goes, how do you feel about AI and everything coming in? Are you scared and all this stuff? And I'm like, man, bring it on. The more AI, the more perfection, the more rock and roll goes from here to here, because you can't fabricate that kind of emotion and attitude. You can make it perfect. You can even try to fabricate emotion if you want. But the more cleaner, the more perfect, the more pop gets like that, and people thinking it's going to change music. Yeah, it's going to change music, and it's going to make us look at rock and roll and attitude and bring it up to the surface again, where it's like people are going to want that more and more because they're tired of how homogenized and pasteurized everything sounds.
Yeah.
That's what I believe is going to happen. So yeah, bring on AI. Let's go. Rock and roll will rule again.
I think so. I mean, AI guitar is plugged into like a neural DSP quad cortex. I mean, the world's going to burn.
Yeah. Listen, we'll be on a different planet by then, trying to breathe. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, probably. Well, Nuno, you've said it all, man. Appreciate chatting. This was an awesome first interview. I'll have to do this again. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks, brother. Thanks, Sharon. Appreciate it.
An all-new episode of The Jeremy White Show.
Available wherever you stream.